right, yeah, glad to be here. Glad to pull the talk forward a little bit this afternoon. Before I start, I wanted to settle a bar bet. This is why I love NANOG, this is why I love being back at NANOG. So we had a discussion in the hallway earlier over coffee about something that nobody outside this conference probably in the world would ever care about, which was 32-bit AS numbers, and which one of them in the world is the best connected, right? That seems like an interesting question. And what region would you think it might be in? Maybe Russia, South America, somebody said Middle East. Guesses? No? It got kind of violent. I mean, we were putting down money on which one this was going to be. So I just wanted to settle that before I get started. We looked it up. And the best connected 32-bit AS on Earth at the moment is 262.589. Yes. Internexa, Brazil, where they've been giving out 32-bit ASs consistently, and they have incredible peering at the PTTs. So congratulations, Internexa, who is here. On to my topic. That was like a lightning talk on the side of a lightning talk. Today I'm actually going to talk to you about the 512K moment, which we all felt briefly as a disturbance in the force back on 12th August. And if you remember, the internet is about up and to the right. So here's the classic plot. This is actually a display of what we at Renesas, now Dyn Research, considered to be the consensus routing table size over the years. You can't read the scale on the left, so I provided the magic 512K for you. And you can see that the red line is our consensus estimate. That is, if you rounded all of our hundreds of peers off to the nearest 1,000, you forced them to guess a table size. And you said, to the nearest 1,000, what has the most votes? That's what the red line would be. The blue lines represent other plausible guesses, which can be significantly higher. This thing tends to trend above consensus because people tend to send you all of their personal favorite routes, customer routes, and so forth, in addition to what we think of as sort of portable, global, real full table. So you can watch this thing growing through the years. We've all been watching this for years. And it kind of ticks up. The amazing thing about it really is the regularity with which it ticks up. So this thing has been ticking up at 30, 33, 32K a year. We start getting towards the exhaustion panic for IPv4, and maybe that's it, maybe not, but it starts to accelerate a little bit, 48K additional routes per year in 12 and 13, 40K more, 471 at the start of this year, and it's ticking on up. And so we all know, because we've been through this exercise before, this is going to pass the magic TCAM limit for everybody. We passed it in, I think, 2003 for 128K, and in 2008 for 256K. So here comes 512. And we looked at this curve, and you can plot it right out. And you can see that sometime in 2015, as we enter 2015, we're probably going to be at a solid 519 as consensus, because it's been another big growth year. And so, of course, that crosses the line. We're going to cross the 512K limit. And if you extrapolate, it's probably going to happen about the second week of November. So we have about a month to go, again, before the consensus reaches that point. Lots of people already think this has happened, because lots of people have full tables that are reasonably large. We're just talking about the consensus view. So we can drill in on this, and I know you're saying, wait a minute, we had the 512K day, it was back in August. Well, not really. I mean, and to figure out why, you have to look at what's happening here. So about 60% of our peers actually believe that the table is larger than the consensus figure, the one that is most favored by the most number of people. And today's consensus estimate, it's actually yesterday's because I made the slides yesterday, is 507, still safely underneath 512. If you wanted to, I wager there are probably a couple dozen people in this room who could just pull out some /24s and deaggregate to about 5,000 prefixes and get us across this line right now as we sit here. If you want to, if you like hearing pagers go off. But don't do that. What happened back on 12th August was kind of a preview. It's kind of a, it was a preview. You can't see it in our data because at 1 hour resolution, you can't see it. Each one of these little dots on the screen is an hour. This happened for about 20 minutes, and it was a normal intraday fluctuation, right? One of the providers, who I will not name on this slide, but I will name shortly, deaggregated 20,000 routes and pushed us over the line. So on that day in August, we push over the 512K line, and we get one of these plots, which you've seen Renesas do red-green announce withdraw plots in BGP announce withdraw rates for a decade. Here's another one. So the advertisements are in green, and the withdrawals are in red. These are rates at a 1-second resolution throughout this period of a few hours. And you can see it's a log scale, first of all, but even so, you can see that it's interesting because the advertisements peak first, because we started to get some BGP session resets from some of our peers who then sent us a full table, which happened to be a very large full table at the moment. And so that's the big spike. But then the red spike comes very shortly thereafter, and it's almost as large. This is a huge number of withdrawals, more than you would expect given what was being announced at the time, which is a sign that whatever just happened in this burst has caused diverse problems around the world. And so we have our guess, right? There was lots of equipment that had run out of space in TCAM to store all of the 512. As of that morning, this was August, so it was only about 500K in the consensus view. But then Verizon Business 701 deaggregated these 30,000/24s, and 30 or 60 seconds later, we had this storm because the consensus routing table suddenly was 528,000 routes. Somebody figured out what was going on. They pulled all those back. Sanity was restored. Table comes back down under the magic 512 limit for everybody on Earth, and we're fine again. Okay. Here's just another view of the withdrawal rates. Again, log scale, and you can see this amazing surge that takes place. It's about a 60-fold increase in the rate of BGP withdrawals across our peer set, and this is the 10 minutes just before the hour. So most of the prefixes that got taken out, meaning they were withdrawn during this withdrawal storm, were in fact the things that just were injected by 701. So most of the damage was done in terms of reachability to themselves. But if you take the prefixes that were in withdrawals during the meaty part of the storm, and you map them out, and you track them back to their owners, you find about 24,000 sort of innocent prefixes that got caught in this as well. If you spread them out, you see a distribution of these withdrawn, these probably suffering prefixes that doesn't really look like the distribution of prefixes overall on Earth. I mean, superficially it does. You can see that the largest count belongs to the US, and number 2 to Russia, and on down. But some of these countries have impacts in that withdrawal surge that exceed what you would expect based on their share of the table naively. So, for example, Iran has almost 400 prefixes that are withdrawn during this 10-minute period. China loses more than 1,000 prefixes. Thailand loses close to 600. Indonesia, more than 800. Russia loses, about 2,500 prefixes. So suddenly it's a bad day for a lot of people everywhere. And this is just the preview talk, as I'll show you in a minute. What I'd like to do is take these affected prefixes and find out what happens to them in the follow-on study, which happens starting about the second week of November, when 512K becomes the new normal everywhere. We will find out whether these prefixes are going to have problems again, or whether the routers that had problems the first time were upgraded or had their TCAM readjusted to take away all the TCAM for IPv6 and give it to IPv4 instead. So here's an example of a bad outcome. Here is Russian provider VimpelCom. Their specific AS here is 21332. It's not their primary, but this is trace routes that we are sending from our global infrastructure inbound to VimpelCom 21332 through their two providers. One of their providers is themselves, VimpelCom 3216. That's in purple. And one of them is Rostelecom, the Russian incumbent, in red. And you can see that exactly aligned with this event, we stopped being able to get trace routes through from one part of VimpelCom to itself. Elsewhere, we can look in the Philippines. And these are just a couple of examples that we pulled out to make a quick lightning talk yesterday. Here's Bayan, a provider in the Philippines, which has diverse transit and loses its connectivity to PACnet. It loses it at least once, then they fix something, lose it again. And it's a very deep sag. Again, we're measuring this not through BGP. This is not a second look at the same data set. This is us looking with trace routes, something completely different, to figure out if we can still get traces into the customers of Bayan Telecommunications in the Philippines. And for these 2 periods, on either side of 8 o'clock UTC on the 12th of August, we basically stopped being able to get trace routes through their connection to PACnet, which is a very important connection for them. And others are impacted as well. So again, something here was exposed to the 512K effect. And we don't yet know which routers they were, although we are currently trying to pull those out. And of course, we can hope that those routers have been appropriately upgraded or reconfigured so that this doesn't happen as this becomes normal. So just to sum up, the probability that you were going to have a bad day on 512K day was not uniform across the world. There were particular countries, but more probably particular providers, and actually more specifically, specific people who had some work to do and did not have that work completed before 512K became the new normal. So think of this as a free warning, as a 10-minute warning shot across your bow, that because of up and to the right, 512K will be here in consensus for everyone broadly around the planet, probably by the second week of November, about a month from now, and certainly by the end of the year. So I hope this gives everybody a little bit of motivation to go out and fix what needs to be fixed. That's what I've got, so thanks very much.